Hello, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morassutti. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Don't forget to subscribe to Candid Frank Stanisci 1030 on YouTube, now on CFL Talk. Here he is, David Morassutti. David, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm okay. It was a very interesting weekend of football games.
It was. I just remembered, what was it, 2 weeks ago? We said probably the best weekend of football the CFL has had.
In a
Feel
while,
like
yeah.
we, I feel like we did. I feel like we jinxed it because the play has dropped off a bit. But there's a central reason why that has happened, though. I think. Oh, we lost Frank. Okay, well, while we wait for Frank to come back, I'll explain. I feel like the last few weeks we've been dealing with a few issues. One, namely, being quarterbacks haven't been healthy. We've had how many teams lose their starting quarterbacks this year? And you notice the teams are doing really well this year. Most of them are keeping their starting quarterback healthy, minus the BC Lions. BC Lions, unfortunately, Vernon Adams Jr., him getting injured, that forcing Dane Evans to step in. But Dane Evans is not like some of these other quarterbacks that are around in the league. I think that's something that has to be talked about a little bit here because not many teams have a Dane Evans in the wings. A lot of teams, actually, there's some teams reportedly looking to bring in Dane Evans when their quarterbacks went down, but BC wasn't going to do that, mainly because Vernon Adams has had some issues keeping healthy, staying healthy, and you need two quarterbacks in the CFL. Now, do you need two starting quarterbacks? No, but if you can have one guy that can pitch in when somebody goes down, like Dane Evans is doing right now for Vernon Adams, like BC was on top of the game by doing that. But there's other teams right now that are not so fortunate. One of them being the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who I don't think we're expecting to lose Bo Levi Mitchell, then lose Matthew Schultz. Taylor Powell looked okay in his first start. They go back to Bo Levi Mitchell, and this is something Frank and I were talking about things we wanted to discuss on the show, and this was something that almost escaped my mind, and I don't know how, but the Hamilton Tiger Cats might have done the stupidest thing I have seen a football team do in a really long time. And I want to know who is taking accountability for this decision because okay, so the situation is Hamilton's on their way to winning the game against Ottawa. They're pinned deep in their own end. They got to run out. There's like 13 seconds left in the game or something like that. Now, this is not like the NFL where you can, take a knee, game is done. You have to do it a couple of times. So, Bo Levi Mitchell, the word from the bench was that we told him to take a knee. Bo Levi Mitchell doesn't take a knee. He tries to do a QB sneak to to push because they're right up against their end zone, right? Something goes wrong, fumble snap or something, that could mean a touchdown for Ottawa, right? I've seen situations like that. So Bo Levi Mitchell goes for a QB sneak. Mind you, I can't remember the last time Bo Levi Mitchell had ever done a QB sneak in his life. And as he's getting pushed back by the Redbacks players, he suffers a leg injury. I believe it was I don't know if they called it a fracture, but it's a leg injury.
Yeah, lower. Yep, it's a fracture from what I heard.
Pretty much a fracture. We knew he had to be carried off. When you can't put any weight, when you can't walk off, most likely it's broken.
They're hoping it's a fracture and a fracture alone, no ligament damage, because if there's no ligament damage, he could be back very easily by the end of the season. I'm sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So first thing I want to know is why is Bo Levi Mitchell in the game there? Even if it's to take a knee, I think it wasn't didn't Trevor Harris hurt himself on a very similar play or a similar situation where it's late in the game, his team, Saskatchewan.
We follow a team that does that all the time, David, but it's a young player trying to establish himself, not a senior player whose body might be, technically
He
speaking, a
just
little
came
more
back from an
fragile.
injury. That was his first game back, and we don't even know how healthy he was. Because Hamilton's in a desperate situation. They can't afford to lose right now. So my question here is one. I don't care if Bo Levi Mitchell was told to do one thing and he did something else. Bo Levi Mitchell should never been out on the field. So that's a coach's decision there. Okay. And two, why was that? Why not run the ball? If you're gonna do something, if you need to get a few yards, run the ball with your running back. The likelihood of your running back getting taken down for a loss, very, very slim. At least then you're running out the clock. I know you can't throw the ball in that situation because you're not running out the clock in that situation. But the Argos in a touchdown Atlantic, they were up a minute and 30 left in the game. Chad Kelly was not out there because the game was out of reach. That's a coach realizing I'm not like their coaches are now going to start learning from this. This is a learning moment. Unfortunately, the Tiger Cats are paying the price right now for that it's stupidity in my opinion.
Okay, whether I don't disagree with your terminology and your definition, but one thing's for sure: uh, they have a lot riding on Bo Levi Mitchell. A lot riding on him. Not only his salary, but his absence, his previous absence, his return, his first game back. There's something to be said for getting back into game shape after being gone for 5 weeks. I think that's what it was. He was gone 5 weeks. He wasn't quite gone six. This would have been his sixth week, I think. But anyway, I digress. The point being that the first chance you have to take him out, you take him out. Never mind. Never mind any other reason other than he just came back from an injury, and he's not in total game shape, and you don't want to risk a guy like him, as important as he is to you and your organization, and put yourselves in the position where something really bad could happen. We hear it multiple times. We have watched myriad of football games where teams have been far enough ahead and Caleros is still in the game. People saying, "Why is Caleros still in the game? He should be gone." And people are right. That statistically speaking, if the quarterback's out there, these are odds that you can bet on. If the quarterback isn't out on the field, he's not getting injured. The odds are really good. He's not getting injured. Soon as you put him on the field, you're tempting fate. And Hamilton, Bo Levi Mitchell, whichever of them is the one that's guilty for suggesting that he run. If he did that himself, he just compounded that the Hamilton organization, and I say organization because, the guy that's sitting on the sidelines that they call the coach, he's also a president of the company of the team. He's a high management person. He more than anybody must have the ability to appreciate the importance of Bo Levi Mitchell and the insignificance of the last minute and change of a football game that they most probably, and odds were very good, they were going to win.
Yeah. To me that's a situation there where if I'm the owner of the team, this is the problem with right now who has to own up for this decision? It should be Orlando Steinauer. He is the coach. He's the vice president. He's the GM. He runs the ship right now. Do you not notice two teams that are falling below? Well, Edmonton, I don't know how high the expectations were, but the teams that are really struggling are the ones that have one person in charge of everything.
All three of the teams that are suffering, all the teams that have a guy that's more than just a coach, right?
I,
A guy that's more than just a coach. He's a GM, and in Hamilton's instance, it's much like Edmonton, right? Yeah, well, all right. So go ahead. I know this is insert subject management cap.
management cap. Well, I mean, if
How's
you
that for a segue?
well, yeah, so the Edmonton Elks made a move that they think is going to shake things up, but you're bringing in somebody who's already within your coaching staff because you can't afford to bring anyone else in. So Jarius Jackson is, as you know, former CFL quarterback, three-time Grey Cup champion. He was also a Grey Cup champion as a coach with Chris Jones. So Chris Jones obviously has a lot of faith in him. He was promoted to offensive coordinator, and he's going to retain his role as quarterbacks coach. But on top of that, Steve McAdoo, who is the offensive coordinator, I was wondering, well, what are they doing with Steve McAdoo?
Special
Well,
consultant.
he's just going to be a consultant now. And it's like will remain on the staff in an advisory role. We know that McAdoo and Chris Jones have a history together, so I didn't see. That's where I was like, I don't see McAdoo being fired. Maybe losing the play calling duties, which if you're doing that to an offensive coordinator, that's literally the only job they really have is
I'll
preparing.
lay you dollars to donuts, David. It was less Chris Jones coming to McAdoo, more McAdoo going to Chris Jones,
Probably.
saying, "You know what? We got to
It's not,
change something up."
it's
Because
not
that's a unified team there. That management team that Chris Jones has, they're very tight.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to give Jarius Jackson the benefit of the doubt that maybe he can do something different. But what drastic change can you expect a coach to make at this point of the season? I think they do have a bye week, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
what can the Elks do now to change? Now, they could potentially make small changes and maybe play calling can change. But it's more than play calling that's the problem here. There's also a player
Well, I
personnel
don't
issue.
know, David. I think we have to also consider the fact that sometimes a different voice, and a history, erasing the past as much as you can and work to concentrate more on the future might be beneficial in this case. I don't disagree with you, but what I think maybe they're hoping for is a different voice. And Jarius Jackson is Jarius Jackson, right? He's not McAdoo. So, he's going to do what Jarius Jackson thinks he should do. And he has the advantage that he's going to have, I think. I look at it this way: you've got a new voice, a new guy doing the talking. You got a group of players who are going, I don't like where we are. And maybe, just maybe, it'll trigger a reset. It's hard to reset when you have the same group of people trying to attack the same problems that have been problems for the last 7 games. Because that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking a 7-game history of problems that goes back to last year, even. And now you got somebody new coming in there, and maybe people can erase whatever was going on before. They need a change, David. They can only do as much as we dislike the management cap. You got to deal with it. They got to do what they can within it. They can't work outside it. So unless they want to get fined or get in deep trouble, so they've got to make a change, and this is as big a change as they can make. With the management cap being a CFL rule, and it's a hard and fast rule.
So one thing I'm gonna just mention before I get more into the coaching cap. At what point do you ask, with Jarius Jackson, does he say, let's give the kid a try? Let's get Trey Ford in here.
Ooh, see, that's one that there's something going on there that we're not
Yeah.
hearing, and that the reporters aren't reporting on,
Well, there may not
because
even
it
be
just
enough
doesn't
reporters
make
to
sense.
ask the questions.
Well, it doesn't make sense. There's the easiest answer is to say he has some sort of injury or some sort of situation that precludes him from starting. That's the obvious one. But we haven't heard anything like that. He's been a healthy scratch. He's been a healthy oops, not even going to wear a uniform, is he even practicing with the team? I'm beginning to wonder. That's how far away from the team I feel he is, Trey Ford.
Yeah, I mean, we don't hear anything. We don't hear anything about Trey
It's
Ford.
information there makes me a lot of red flags are up in the air there with that, because I don't understand why he hasn't been given a chance. He was given a chance last year.
He was, and he looked pretty good. He looked like a quarterback that has flash skill that we're not really seeing with this Elks team. Like this Elks team is just barely able to get anything going right now, and that's a problem.
Well, that's a change that that always could make a difference. And we've learned this year that there are plenty of quarterbacks that have come in 2 and 3 deep that have had pretty good games. So not giving that a chance to happen, I think that's an opportunity that, maybe you're right. Maybe Jarius Jackson goes, you know what? I'm a different guy. If there's a problem with Trey Ford and the coaching staff, again, these are all I am surmising. I have no. I'm desperate to understand why Trey Ford hasn't been given a chance to be the quarterback of the Edmonton Eskimos at some point. Season this total collapse of a season, and we have not seen him under center. It just boggles my mind. So maybe Jarius Jackson. Maybe it's a coaching change that'll help get him in there. I don't know. But they
I
need something.
they
And
do.
this is just one. I agree with you. This isn't enough on its own, unless it's the spark, which it could be. We never know.
Maybe somebody else that's leading the charge that can make a change. I maybe like think about Steve McAdoo. He's a pretty accomplished coach, right? This is not
Right.
somebody who hadn't had success in the past. The question I'm just wondering
Won a
is,
couple of Grey Cups.
yeah, won a couple great cups and had some success with different teams, right? Maybe I just think that yeah, the coaching change is not just going to be enough. I do think that there's got to be something else done. I don't know if that's going to have to be done. The thing is
And what you're
you're
saying is it may be stuff that's done that we don't even really see. It's a
exactly
behind the scenes thing.
right now. I do know that everyone was asking about the when's Chris Jones is going to get
Mm.
get let go. Well, I'm going to read you something here from the president, Victor Cooey, right? The person that would make that change. He said, "There's always something I think about, good or bad. Actually, because that's my job, I got to make those tough decisions. Obviously, Jerry Roy Simon would play a factor into this too. But, like, what are you going to do with the coaching cap, right? Making drastic decisions in your football operation midseason is very difficult. It's like it take anybody from someone else's organization, and well, that's actually a good point. There's like, who are you going to bring in? But the coaching cap remains the biggest one, right?
Mhm.
I think the way that there was reports saying that they kind of finagled or they made Jones's deal kind of work differently because of all the different rules that he has. Although that
Mhm.
was shut down a little bit, but I think, yeah, I like we know the reason why Chris Jones is doing so much. He sold himself with that job and saying, "Well, you don't need to pay for a GM because I can be a GM. You don't have to pay for a head coach because I can be a head coach. You don't have to get a defensive coordinator because I can do that." But the problem is they can't do anything else because there's money being saved, but it's also like this person is doing everything, so we can't just let Chris Jones go and then boom, we have to figure out three positions right off the hop that you have to replace.
Can you can you s can you take away his head coaching position and put someone in there as head coach?
The team
Do you
maybe
find some money somewhere?
maybe if he decides one way or the other, either I'm giving up my head coach position or I'm giving up my GM position. I don't think the team would take it away from him
I personally
unless the team.
think taking away the head coaching position on a temporary basis, or I don't know, we've seen it in hockey. We haven't seen it in football where a head coach, well, yes, we have, where a head coach has been forced to, whether it's illness or something, and another coach comes in, and then we see a different approach, and then we see a team maybe change a little bit. We've seen it in hockey. Do we need to see it today in this? And I think you pointed at the beginning at the major problem I think that we're having is that when you give a person so much power within the framework of the pyramid, right? The management pyramid, when too many of the positions are taken up by one person, it's not a pyramid anymore. It's a
Mhm.
block, right? And that block is harder to change a few of the bricks like you can in a pyramid, right? So I think that's something that teams are going to start thinking about. I think this idea of giving people too much responsibility is going to be harder for people to get because it's not working well. It's not working well in Hamilton. It's not working well in Edmonton. And was the third team? What was the third team?
Calgary.
Calgary. Thank you. It's not working well in Calgary. Um, I think there is more to being a GM or a coach than just the fact that that's just another. It's not just another position, because when a coach talks to a player and when a GM talks to a player, there's two different conversations going on. How does one guy have both those conversations? And then you look at Hamilton. How does one guy have three
Mm-hmm.
conversations? What are you today? Are you the vice president? Are you talking to me as the GM? Are you talking to me as the coach? And and then when the coach talks to you, the player thinks they know what the GM is thinking, right? It just, to me, it, I don't know. Maybe I'm too old fashioned. I just think it's better that the roles be more distinctive. There be more of a line between the definition of the roles, so there's no confusion. Um, you know, and if the coach doesn't like you and he's also the GM, well, if you feel, I should say, that the coach doesn't like you, the GM doesn't like you too. So, it makes things kind of a little more hopeless, right? And in the situation of Edmonton, use them as an example. If the coach, right, is having problems, and you talk to the GM, maybe in an honest way to help, there isn't that opportunity. There isn't a who do you talk to? You've got one guy. That's it. There's no way out. Your conversation begins and ends with one guy. I don't think that's good. I like the idea that there's a GM, and I like the idea that there's a coach. And I know that if you look at teams that are successful, Winnipeg and all its success, BC has a almost what we're talking about, because the head coach in BC has GM. He's kind of an assistant GM there. So, but there is a GM. It's just you have a coach that shares the GM responsibilities, and they're doing pretty good.
Yeah. No,
So I don't know how right I am about worrying
Frank,
about
think
it.
back to when pinball was brought back to the Argos. Remember what he said when he asked about the collaborative nature that he was going to work.
Yeah, I don't want to be the
I don't want to be
smartest
the
guy in the
smartest
room.
guy in the room. I don't want to be the smartest guy at the table. He
I want to bring in smart
what
people.
when we were in Hamilton, I think it was one of the TICAT media guys was one of the reporters there was telling me, pinball gets his fair share of the credit, but sometimes we feel like we don't hear about the other guys that have put the work in. And
True.
well, the issue is because the media doesn't report it. But if you go and you talk to pinball, he's talking about Vince Magri. He's talking about Alex. Oh, why am I blanking on his last name? But the person that's also working in the operations department. Like they do get their moment, right, in terms of recognition. But that's what good organizations do, and they find a way to make it work. Cap wise, I'm sure maybe it's because pinball's maybe not making that much. um, it's Alex
Well,
Russell.
the money he's making doesn't have to do with, he can get out and around. He's probably not part of the management
I
cap.
think well, I think pinball
Well, he's a
definitely is.
GM. He has to be.
Yeah. Maybe Bill Manning, because Bill Manning is the president of both TFC and the Argos. Maybe his salary doesn't count as much. But I don't know how far the management cap extends. Right? Is the
I don't think the presidents are included.
Yeah, because I don't think I mean they shouldn't be, in my opinion.
I think the definition, if I remember correctly, has to do. It's basically, I'm just grasping here, but I hope I help people understand. The day-to-day operation of the team is what's under the management cap.
Yeah.
Anybody you know what I mean? Anybody that helps organize the team on a basis of actually running the team,
Mhm.
as well as being on the field, having to do with that. But when you're on the business side of the team, you're handling the business side. That's not part of the management cap. So
Yeah.
it's just. It's just
I think
I don't.
football
I think
operation.
Pinball's a
Football
GM, so
operation.
yeah, he would be.
I think it's a football operations cap. So anyone
Yes,
that falls under that, I don't think Manning would, just because it wouldn't make sense, because they could just say,
he's not
well,
part of operations.
he oversees the organization, but he's not making football operations decisions.
Right, day-to-day stuff.
So I love having this discussion about this topic, because you know you're seeing right now the teams that are thriving are the ones that don't have that structure of we're gonna try to outsmart the other teams by giving multiple jobs to one person. And some
We're
teams,
gonna do our best to hire the best guy, and
yeah,
to hire the best guy, we have to give him the most money. How do we give him the most money? We give him more responsibility. We give him more hats to wear.
and when somebody has that now, Orlando Steinauer, when he first got there, it worked out, but now the cracks are starting to show, in my opinion. Right, he probably, if he wanted to, he can't. I know that right now Scott Milanovich technically is an advisor, so I don't think he counts that much towards the cap, or at all.
No
I
kidding.
don't think they could bring, like, if they want to right now bring in a new coordinator and bring in Scott Milanovich, I don't even think they can do that right now in Hamilton. Like, it boggles my mind that the CFL can. I understand why they had implemented in the first place. I think there was a better
They
way
they
to solve
yielded
this
to the
issue.
players. They yielded to the players, David. It's what the players wanted. You know that. They
And
complained about it in the
guess who's
last couple.
suffering the most because of it, in my opinion? It's the players that suffer the most. You don't think right now, if you told the players, look, we can do one of two things. We can improve the product by making sure teams are having the best staff possible, or, you know, but the issues that the players had with the cap was that, teams could go out and give coaches and get coaches left, right, and center, and players were being cut with no issue, like things like that. But the thing is, players were fighting for the wrong thing for the longest time. Players should have been fighting for those guaranteed deals that they're now getting, or partially guaranteed deals, because no deal is 100% guaranteed in the CFL. But to get some partial guarantee, I think that was a bigger fight, and more of a fight worth having, rather than, no, teams got to be smarter with how they spend their management cap. I understand that there's teams that will say, well, we can't do X, Y, and Z because we're spending this much on a coach that's not with us. But I feel like this was something that I think if you asked the players and if you asked the league, they would want a do over on this for sure.
I'll agree with you and use these words. If being destined into not having a good season, a whole bad season, because you have coaches that you can't change, how much are you happy that they can't get new coaches? It's come to the point where, to your point, I think there's a parallel between having no number one quarterback and bad coaching, or coaching that's just dried up. You know, it runs its course. Not every, there isn't a coach that lasts forever, right? They have a shelf life. So what happens when that shelf life expires in the middle of a season? Now you're destined to have a bad year, like you're getting what you're having in I believe in Edmonton. I think they've got a management issue there. No matter how you slice it, it's a management issue. Did they make a mistake on the quarterback, on signing the quarterback? Are they not bringing in the right players to create an environment of winning? It can We blame the players first because they're the ones that are in the position to play well or not. But they're not there if management doesn't bring them in. So they're there because of management. Then there's the coach. They've been brought in, they're players. How well are they coached? And it's a, chain is only as strong as its weak link. Manager, but if you don't have coaching, right? If you can have a great general manager and they can bring in players, but for some reason those players aren't who the general manager's brought in, and the players they bring in and the coaches can't coach them up, and coaches can't coach players that just aren't there, they just don't have it. So you need all three to work. It's a symbiotic relationship, the GM, coach, and players, and there's a relationship between all three. And when you have one guy taking up two positions, it just makes it harder. That the relationship is harder to work with, I think. And at least what we're seeing right now, I think, points that out.
Yeah, I think the big lesson here right now is we're not talking about an Edmonton Elks team that's having a bad season. We're talking about an Edmonton Elks team that's had a bad couple of seasons. They've only in the last 2 years, I think, have since Chris Jones got to Edmonton, have won 4 games. Four. They're now they're they now set the record for the longest losing streak at home amongst North American professional teams.
It goes back to when they had the other name. Remember the other name?
Yep. Yep. They thought that.
This
Well,
record goes back to when they were the other name,
yep.
which everybody's talking about. Many of the Elks fans are asking for it to come back. Some of them
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
think it's the
I
name.
hate to
Some of
say
them
this.
think it's the
That's
name.
not changing what's going on with your team. I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that one. But the big one for me is you're looking at obviously a decision here that hasn't worked. I do think change is going to happen at the end of the season.
Can't change it.
You can't change it
Can't
now.
change it now.
There is going to be a way to get it done at the end of the season, I do think. And I think if you're Edmonton and if you're the CFL, the danger here is not just how bad the team's playing bad, but at some point the fan base is going to say, "Why are we going to the games?" And we know that when teams are this bad, fans are not going to go, and that's Edmonton has already dealt with losing seasons in terms of losing money. They're not making money right now. They can't afford to not make money. And this is
They're such a great franchise. I mean, they mean so much to the history of the Canadian Football League.
no team that has won
It's just
more Grey Cups in the league.
look, it's
Like,
like watching the Montreal Canadiens in hockey. I mean,
mhm.
when you see that crest and you see that team on the field of play and they're horrible, it just doesn't make sense.
Yep. And so this is where I do think something has to change. It's not going to happen this year. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but if I'm Victor Cooey, I believe I'm saying his name correctly,
Mhm.
all the eyes should be on him. People are going to talk about Chris Jones, but he's not. Chris Jones is only doing the job that he's being paid to do. Somebody has to hold him accountable because obviously he is the one it's he's the one running the ship.
Somebody has to do something to make the team play better. There has to be some sort of leadership because right now they lack leadership, whether it's the general manager, whether it's the president, whether it's the coach, the quarterback, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the defensive line, whether it's special teams. Someone has to take a leadership role, and that team needs to be led out of the wilderness that they find themselves in. That's who they are. They are a team in the wilderness. They are basically lost. And someone somewhere has to point them in the right direction. That right direction won't necessarily need to be winning a game. It's no longer just about winning now. They are so far away from winning. They need to look like there's hope that they'll win. That's what they need right now. That's what they don't have. If you're an Edmonton Elks fan, there's very little hope your team's going to win. That's got to change. So they've got to make that change and then make the next step without going backwards. But we've got to see some improvement in the way they play. Do you want to blame the quarterback? Sure, let's blame the quarterback. So change. Oh, wait a minute, we did change the quarterback. Well,
They
okay.
changed it
What?
a few times.
Yeah, I know. I'm just being facetious. I'm just being silly. It just the point is something has to change. The team has to look like they're coming out of the wilderness, but they look like a team that has quit. 27-0 in football is quit.
They have been shut out
That's
twice.
not just
They
losing.
have been shut out twice. It is really hard to not score a point in the CFL. I've never seen a team ever get shut out in my life. I've seen teams score 1 point. I've seen teams score 2 points. I've seen teams score 3 points. I have never seen a team get shut out, let alone shut out twice in the same season.
Yeah. We've seen it in the history in the low scoring NFL days, when teams were winning 6-0 and 10-0 or 10-2. You know what I mean? Those days. because there were hardly any points being scored, but not in the Canadian Football League. And the scoring is up, and it's still up with what Edmonton is not doing, which is scoring.
Yeah, no, it's pitiful. I have a lot of I tweeted and I said it's one thing for a team to be bad. It's one for a team to be bad and have no hope of getting out of it. I can't even describe what I like, what I would do right now, because there's just so much that I could point out that needs to be changed, and you can't make those changes in this season. It's a lost season, and that's really tough to sell right now. Edmonton can do all the gimmicks they want to try to sell and get tickets purchased. Nothing's going to work right now because people don't want to go and see a team that's given
That's
up on a
bad.
season, because they're pretty much at the midway point and they haven't won a single game.
Let's talk about some positives. So far, all we've done is talk about an
You need to
injury
explain
from
right
Hamilton. We're talking about Edmonton. We talked about Calgary that are 2-5. Saskatchewan, they have their number one quarterback injured, but they at least seem competitive, which is fantastic. Their defense, and then you have Winnipeg and BC in the Western Division. These are two teams that, you've got Winnipeg that was unbeatable for the longest time, and BC seemed to be unbeatable. Yeah, they're not perfect, but two really good football teams, which makes it really tough in that division if they want to make up some points with playing those teams. I love what BC's done. It's fantastic that Evans has found a place to show what he can do, and he's the quarterback that Hamilton had before last season and towards the end of last season. Evans worked his way out of his doldrums at the end of the season, which is why I wasn't sold on bringing in Bo Levi Mitchell. I think they would have been fine with Evans.
You know what? Like I do think I really like what BC has done, because that was a team that people were like, oh, they lost their shining knight in Nathan Rourke. And I said, well, Vernon Adams Jr. is not a bad compromise. Then you go and get Dane Evans, and to me, I mean, I said it when you kind of we lost you for a second. Then I said that's a team that was proactive. That was a team that's saying, we don't want to be a team that relies. We want to have every basis covered,
They
and
they they believe a backup quarterback should be a starter.
or at least
That's
close
what they
to being a
proved.
starter.
That's what they proved to me.
The backup, they want their backup quarterback to be somebody that if their starter goes down, there's no hesitancy about whether this player can get the job done.
There is not a stark contrast when their number one goes down.
No.
Now, the guy they had last year was, an MOP kind of candidate. But we also know Vernon Adams had an ability to be an MOP. So their backup then was somebody with pedigree, with the ability,
Mhm.
historically speaking. So, and now what they did was they took Evans, who had a good run with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He was a big part of their team finishing first, going to the Grey Cup, for goodness sake. So, not a bad number two in BC. I like what BC does when it comes to quarterback. They organize their cap in a way that they don't give up the idea of having two number one quarterbacks. We can argue about how close they are every year, but there's no doubt that they both can be number ones. Even here in Toronto, who's the number one quarterback if Kelly goes down?
Well, based on the depth chart, it'd be Cameron Dukes, but we already know that the drop off between Chad Kelly and Cameron Dukes is. I hate to say it, but I just because we haven't seen Cameron Dukes a lot, but we have the idea that it's not going to be the same.
Right. They might prove it different. There's nothing to say that the Argos don't have a guy who's a good number one. But what we are talking about is the perception through the experience established by the number two quarterback. Does he have a history, right? And Evans does have a history. Adams had a history when he went to BC and when they traded for him from Montreal.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so Hamilton thought they did that when they got Matthew Schultz, right, to be the backup for Bo Levi Mitchell. We knew that Matthew Schultz had a pedigree that at least he could start and win a game, right?
Yep, he had a short history, but he had a
Ottawa,
history.
unfortunately, they didn't realize that they had their backup in their fourth string quarterback. So I wonder how different Ottawa's season would have been if Crum was the guy right from the guy at least given the opportunity a little bit earlier. Muncie,
I'd rather sit on the thought that he was there for them to have when they needed him, because their season, even though now they're 3-4, that's not bad for Ottawa being 3-4. If someone had told you, David, that their number one quarterback Mazzoli went down again, and 6 games later they'd be 3-4, I think you'd be happy. I know I would be. I know I am for them. 3-4 is good where they are. It gives them a chance to set things up, for the
it
playoffs.
does. No. I think Ottawa, out of all the East teams, Ottawa's in a really good position. Yeah, they stumbled a little bit this week against Hamilton. Hamilton's a good defense.
I think Crum has a history now. Now, this is where now we're going to find out how good a
Right.
quarterback he is, because the biggest thing for a quarterback is early success needs to be followed up by the effects and the ability of the opposition to get a book on you and now figure out from what they've seen thus far to make you ineffective. How do you adjust as a quarterback who started out
Yeah.
well? Now they're starting to figure you out. Do you have a plan B and plan C? That's what makes great
No,
quarterbacks.
I do agree with that. And I'm very curious to see how does like with Ottawa, that's the big one there. I still think Ottawa's in a good spot. Toronto, we know Toronto right now is like Toronto and Winnipeg are in BC are kind of in like a different tier from the rest of the league. I think Toronto is obviously clear and above the best team in the league, which I'm going to say this, Frank. In my lifetime, I've never seen a Toronto Argonauts team that was overwhelmingly the best team in the CFL.
And does it in so many
Yes.
ways and unpredictably win games. Like every game you go to, you're really not sure how they're going
I,
to
I
win.
think that's a perfect way to describe them. And
You're not sure how
and
they're going to
it's the
win.
perfect way to describe a team that's forged an identity that it's not going to be the Chad Kelly show. It's not going to be like the defense necessarily. It's the perfect team mantra. They've really embraced that, and there's no you don't feel like there's any animosity between any of the players on the team. Like there's no one envious of somebody else. Oh, I think if I got more playing time, I could do this.
Perfect,
There is none of that.
perfectly
I
said. And you know where there's a good spot where that could be very possible? Number 33.
Yep, it is.
Have you seen? I mean, how
Yep.
supportive he is of the rest of his team. He's on the sidelines, making sure that his teammates know what's going on, and he's supporting them from the sidelines. And he is a secondary rusher on the Toronto Argonauts right now. I think it's fair to say he's a record-breaking secondary running back, but he's still. We know this is Willette's team. The running game. He's the face of the running game.
Yes, no, for sure. I mean, first off, Andrew Harris, congratulations on being fifth all time. Um, the problem is
Well deserved,
well
well earned, and
earned.
congrats
The
from me
problem
too.
is that Damon Allen, like, it blows my mind that he is still among the top rushers of all time. He also was here.
When I see that stat, every time I see that stat, I go,
Mike
"Really?
Pringle.
Okay,
I-
I
Mike
forgot."
Pringle is never that record's. I don't think that record's ever going to get touched. So good on him. Like it's good. It's a good omen to realize that there are some really good records that are going to probably stand for a really long time in the CFL, but that you're still seeing guys stick around long enough to break some of these records. I think that's the important one there. Andrew Harris could have walked away after Winnipeg won their second Grey Cup, right? People were kind of saying maybe this is the end of the line for him. No, he stuck around. I do believe that these are records that are important to him. A legacy is kind of important.
Well, I think another Grey
True.
Cup's important to him
Well,
too.
and that's the thing, right? Like we're talking about these records, and maybe this wasn't even of his mind. Maybe he said, "This is a team that's good enough to win again. Might as well get another championship run out of it, right?" And one that he doesn't have to necessarily put his body through what he went through in past years.
Definitely doesn't have to sacrifice his dent he has in the past. He
No.
definitely hasn't had to do that. But what he has done, and I've noticed, and I find it's important. It's unfortunate, when you watch a football game on TV. But if you have the good fortune of going to the game, if you go to the game and you watch each and every game, Harris isn't on the sidelines. He might be recovering, riding the bike, staying in shape, ready to go in, but he's always marching up and down the sidelines, supporting his team. Anytime something happens on the field, he's there. He lets them know what happened and how it can be done better. Or he's just so supportive. He to me exemplifies the Pinball Clemens approach to the game, which is all for one and one for all. And leadership is supporting one, appreciating each other, and that's what they do. They're a great team right now, and that's a capital T, like you said. They are a team, and there really doesn't seem to be any animosity. It's funny, eh? Last year it was there. Remember at the beginning of the year, we haven't seen
Yeah,
it since.
I was just about to bring that up. And so what a 360 for this team, or 180. A team that was fighting each other on the field, literally fighting each other on the field. We were. I was remember being at that game and saying, well, "What's going on down there?" Like we could see it from the press box, and people could see it on the field. To now, obviously, winning helps, right? But this is a team that's never sad. Like there are players that when you talk to them about the win, they don't seem satisfied, right? Because this team has bought into the ultimate goal, but they're always focused on taking it one game at a time, right? Every time I talk to the players after practice, they're like, "We're looking to go 1-0, looking to go 1-0," and it's funny because every time they say that, they give a smile to me because I think I've heard that phrase at least 10 times this season from players, from coaches, from anyone I've talked to. So, but it's a mantra that's working for them right now. And I think it's a similar one that Winnipeg has had. I said, this is like a Calgary. You're talking about a Calgary of the East. Really, they're really taking that Calgary spirit and bringing it to Toronto.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that next man up thing, it really is happening with the Toronto Argonauts, where they are very solid. Um, why don't we? I guess I look at the leaders, in the league, right? The stats leaders, and this is another point I'm going to make. It's not always teams that are doing well don't always lead all the stats. If you look at the stats, if you look at wide receivers, leading wide receivers, Tevin Jones,
Mm-hmm.
right? Saskatchewan. None of the top five are Argos. You look at receiving TDs, none of the top five are Argos. You look at defense, tackles, none of the five are Argos. You look at sacks, any of the top five, they're not Argos. Finally, in interceptions, this is on TSN, so if you want to
Yeah.
follow along, Robertson Daniel is third or tied for second with 4 interceptions. It's to me, I think that's what is the highlight of some of the greatest teams in sports aren't necessarily always led by the best players. It's the best team. And that statistic I just pointed out, or those statistics I just pointed out, I think that's why I can say and why I believe you never know how the Argos are going to beat you. So how do you defend against that?
It's really hard because after Robinson Daniel had that big game against the Lions, teams started to not go towards him. Right, they weren't targeting him, and they took note of that. So they would say, "All right, we'll try somebody else." Well, Jamal Peters, he's even better. He's even better in most cases. He was an All-Star last year. Okay, let's test out this 21-year-old rookie Quantez Stiggers. That's not helping. That's not working
Out.
either. All right, now Deshaun Amos, you got the safeties, Royce Metchie's. That that backfield, that defensive backfield might be one of the better ones in the league. It's, they're all making plays.
and so balanced,
There's balance and they're all
so
there's no
balanced.
selfishness either. Like no one's trying to make a play. Yeah, sure. They're sometimes they allow yards, they allow touchdowns. No one's perfect, but they're always looking to make a play and they're not being selfish about it either.
And there's always somebody in a position because of the team play and because of the solid nature of the defense that when the other team makes a mistake, there's always a player available to make the big play.
Yeah.
And you don't know where it's going to come from.
Oh,
Just as you don't know how they're going to beat you, you don't know how the defense is going to kill you. Because the Argo defense, they get a sack when they need a sack. They get an interception when they need an interception. They stop the run game when they need to stop the run game. Now, next week, what's going to happen against Calgary is their defense is going to have a hard time because it's a perfect formula. You've got Calgary whose offense, if you look, Meyer like leads the league in passing yards,
yeah.
and they lead the league in a lot of stats. Right. The problem with Calgary is they don't make the big plays or they don't finish it off.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting battle because I think Calgary is a, they always give Toronto a hard time. They know that they want to beat Toronto because there's a lot of former guys on Toronto that were former Calgary guys on Toronto, so they want to kind of show up a little bit there. And Calgary is not easy. The time travel, getting all the way over there, that plays a factor too.
Yeah, it'll be fun. In the other games that were played, what game did you like the best? Not counting the Argo game because we've talked about the Argos.
What game? I mean, I thought BC, that effort that they gave was top notch. Like we're talking about a team that has going. This is the first start without Vernon Adams, and there was just no drawback there. Another game, I think Montreal. They're a team.
Well, let's talk about that BC game. What do you think was the reason why? What makes them so special? And um, well, the Edmonton thing is that they just you don't give them a chance to beat you because if you give them a chance, they will. And that game against Edmonton was. But go ahead with Montreal. I just wanted to add my
Well,
two
I'll say
cents in
this
that.
about the BC game: there's so much balance in with their offense too. They can run the ball. They put up over 400 yards, which I mean against Edmonton is not that hard, but I mean their defense is pretty solid too, considering they have a pitch to shutout. But I just think their offense is like that's I still think that's the most productive offense in the league. Is it the best offense? Well, if they're not making mistakes, I think it is the best offense in the league. Um, and I mean the Argos can have a bad offense game, but they're the better team, balanced team. I do think BC has the better offense. And then with the Montreal game, you saw a team that had to grind it out a little bit there. They were very they had
Absolutely.
to grind that one out, but I like the fact that they found a way to rush the ball. Um, like that's important. And if you're a team like Calgary, and you're not able to get 20 points. That's really tough to put on your defense to try to win that. And I think Sean Lemon, who signed in Montreal, was not brought back by Calgary. I'm sure he liked that victory
Yeah.
as well. I think
And let me ask you, how did you like the improvement of Steinbeck in that one game? He returned to the kind of guy we expect in the backfield.
I figured this was going to take some time for him because he missed almost all of last season. He lost weight, so when
And he changed his body type.
right, that takes time because he's used to running through guys. Now he's not able to really do that to the same degree. So I think Stanback, if Stanback can get things going, I think it's going to be an interesting battle between Montreal and Ottawa for second in the East. I do think those are the two teams that are going to battle it out. If I had to give my vote, it'd be Montreal right now, just because I think their offense has better weapons. But I do think I'm going to love this battle.
And they have a healthy number
And they
one.
have Fajardo, right? So that's always going to play it. So I think Montreal is going to be an underrated team. They're going to be a team you're going to have to be very weary of down the stretch here. I think if they get the running game going, that's going to make their offense that much tougher to go up against.
I have to leave the last word with you. We're at the end of the show here. David, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank.